Have you guys ever heard the question, what do I need to start getting into Dungeons & Dragons? I know I have. In fact, every time I try to introduce friends to tabletop role-playing games, they always say, I don't have anything to play with, or I don't know where to start. Well, in this video, I'm going to be going over everything that you need to get started playing tabletop role-playing games, if, like many of my friends, you are new to the hobby. My name is Loyal Pythias, and I am the forever DM for my group of friends. I stream RPGs over on twitch.tv/loyalpythias on Fridays and Saturdays, and today I'm going to be talking about what exactly any new player needs, or may just want to buy, for getting into tabletop role-playing games. Now I'm going to start by breaking it down and going over all of the items that are necessary to play the game, and then later on we're going to look at what would be nice to have, or what I would personally recommend to help keep your space both at home and at the table more clean, organized, and efficient. Believe me, your friends will thank you. These requirements are going to vary from game system to game system, but today's list will just be for the most popular systems such as Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder. Now let's get started. What do you need to bring to the table to start your very first tabletop RPG session? Well, the absolute most necessary equipment to bring with you is, well, it's just you. That's it. Just you. I know that seems like kind of a cop-out answer, so I'm also going to make some basic recommendations, but I want to stress that tabletop role-playing games at their very core are these imagination-based, story-driven role-playing games. And what does that mean for you? Well, that means that as long as you and everyone else at the table are present, there's really no reason why all of you can't get together and just take on a role and tell a story together. Now, I know that each campaign is going to use a game system that has a very explicit set of rules, but if you're playing for the first time in a campaign with other players, it's likely because you either A, know all of the players at the table and you've been invited to play with them, in which case someone there can lend you something to use, or B, you're going to be playing using an online interface by yourself, such as Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds. And if that's the case, all the tools are built into the platform for you. You have access to everything, such as macros and a completely automated RNG dice roller. It's very unlikely that you would ever be in a scenario where you were physically at a table with people who you are not friends with and you don't know, and no one's going to let you borrow anything. But if that is the case, and if you do ever find yourself in such a situation, then it's likely going to be at your local game store in some kind of community-hosted event campaign, or even an Adventurers League. But if that's the case, go ahead and talk to your local game store owners or managers. They may be able to lend you some stuff to use. So if you had to bring something, or you just don't feel comfortable borrowing something for your very first campaign, what could you get by with at a bare minimum? Well, for starters, I would suggest getting yourself a single standard set of 7 polyhedral dice. A single standard set is going to come with all of the following dice: a 4-sided, a 6-sided, a 8-sided, 2 10-sided dice, which are also going to combine to make a 100-sided dice, we call those percentiles, a 12-sided, and a 20-sided die. Now, a set of dice like these can be purchased from your local game store, or even online for relatively cheap. A single set, for example, could go for around $8 Canadian on Amazon, and you can even find bundles of multiple full sets for about $20 or $30, again, Canadian, on Amazon, depending on the colors and quality of your choosing. Now, in many RPG systems, you'll also notice that you're going to be asked to roll multiples of the same dice at a time. I am only going to recommend one set of dice here, because if you're just trying to get a feel for the hobby, buying multiple full sets of dice at a time can be quite pricey actually, where just a $10 purchase is going to do alright here. And if you do have to roll multiples of the same dice, let's say for example you need to roll 4d8 or 4 8-sided dice, all you have to do is roll your single 8-sided die 4 times. That's it. Just mark down the results of every roll and boom, Bob's your uncle. And now that we're done talking about dice, guys, we should talk about character sheets. But before we get into that, I'd just like to say that if this video helps you out, or if you want to see more content based around RPGs, then I'd recommend subscribing to my channel, because there are going to be more videos on the way for both new players and new game masters. And if you like this video, please feel free to give it a like and leave a comment down below. So guys, there you are. You have your dice. What's the very next thing we're gonna need? It's your character sheet. All your character sheet is just a piece of paper to help keep track of your character's health, attributes, skills, items, money, really anything that your game master is going to throw at you for a stat, or even just something interesting you want to write down. Every game system is going to have their own specific character sheet, so do be sure to look up your game's specific sheet. And if you don't have access to a printer, you can always go to your local library or even a Staples store and pay a small fee to print out your character sheet. So there we are, we have our character sheet and our dice. We are ready to get started playing a game. Just bring a pencil, your single set of dice, your character sheet, you're on your way. Now, every game system does have a version of your typical player's handbook, but I didn't include that in this category of required to bring for two main reasons. So our first reason for that is pricing. If this is your first time trying out a brand new hobby that you don't even know if you want to stick with, you're likely on a budget, and I'm not going to recommend purchasing one. It's that simple. These core set of rulebooks are often quite expensive, even if you're just buying one individually. And the reason for that is because you really only need one of each book to successfully run a full campaign. Now, at time of recording, the Player's Handbook is going to retail for around 50 Canadian dollars on Amazon. And personally, I feel like that cost is just a little bit too much to expect a new player to shell out for something that they don't even know if they want to stick with. Now, the second reason I didn't include the Player's Handbook in the necessary category is also tied to the first reason. You only need one copy of each book between all of the players to play a successful campaign from start to finish. Your dungeon master or your games master should always have a copy of all of these books on hand to share with the players, or even another player might have a copy of your typical player's handbook that they would lend you during the game. But even if this isn't the case, you are always able to find PDFs online to use for free, but remember, nothing is going to beat a physical copy, and your game master or dungeon master will always have a final say in any rules questions, regardless of what's written in the book. So even when you do get one, don't stay attached. So next, guys, we're going to talk about some accessories that you might want to buy to help make the whole gameplay experience a little bit easier or tidier, and the reasons why I'm going to make these recommendations. So guys, after you've really settled into this game and you've decided you love tabletop role-playing games, what's the first thing I'm going to tell you to go out and buy? You guessed it, it's your Player's Handbook. You want a copy for yourself. Also, if you plan on game mastering or dungeon mastering, I'm also going to recommend that you fill out your entire collection of that core set of rulebooks, since there's typically also a game master's guide or even a monster manual or creature compendium to go along with it. This core set of rulebooks, each book in here is really going to give you a great understanding of the more intricate rules of the system, and it's going to help you be a little bit more independent from your game master and the other players the more you play this game. You can level up between campaigns, it'll help you pick spells between campaigns, for example, if you're some kind of magic user. It'll help you path out your class options later on. For example, if you're a brand new player starting out at level 1 and you finally get to level 3, you don't need to waste all of this time before your next session. You can be ready the moment you show up and you can just start the game. So guys, the second accessory I'd recommend you go out and buy is just a simple, clear, protective plastic sleeve that you can stick any letter-size paper into, as well as a dry erase marker. And the reason I'm going to recommend this is that as time goes on while you're playing your game, you're going to discover that you're constantly erasing and rewriting all these statistics all the time, and eventually you're just going to end up with an unreadable spot on your character sheet, or even some damage on your character sheet. And no one wants that. So with this method, you're going to easily slide your character sheet into the protective sleeve, and you're going to use the dry erase marker to write down all of your stats that change every session on that sleeve. So for example, we're going to use that dry erase marker to write down your health points at current, not your maximum, your experience points, your potions if you use a lot of health potions, anything that's going to change every session or every other session, you're going to want to write down in that dry erase marker. But On your paper in pencil, you're going to want to write down the things that don't change every session or every other session. You're going to want to write down those things that stay more constant more often. Things like your maximum health points, your ability modifiers, your saving throws, all of that stuff. That's what you're going to write down in pencil. That way, you're just going to keep your character sheet in a more pristine condition, and it's going to probably last you the rest of your campaign. For the third purchase I'm going to recommend you go out and get is more dice sets. If you play Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, go ahead and grab yourself some extra 6-sided dice in particular. These 6-sided dice are some of the most commonly rolled dice in these game systems, right up there next to the 20-sided die. And you're typically going to roll more than one when you do roll them. Let's take the spell Fireball, for example, from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. As soon as you're able to cast the spell, which for wizards and sorcerers is at 5th level at the earliest, you're going to get to roll 8d6 for damage. That's going to be 8 6-sided dice, and that amount is only going to increase if you choose to cast that spell using a higher spell slot. Also, let's be honest, you can never go wrong with extra 6-sided dice. It is the most used dice type for board games in the world, and you're always going to have some spares for that Monopoly night, so you can ruin your friendship with your friends. And lastly, guys, I'm going to recommend you go out for your cheap upgrades and get yourself a basic 3-ring binder with a pencil case to keep track of all your character sheets, dice, markers, and pencils. It really is a good way to keep track of all of your RPG accessories, and it's going to help you keep your space both at the table and at home a little bit more tidy. So, at the end of the day, all you really need to play any tabletop role-playing game is a good group of friends and your imagination. But with these few purchases I mentioned, you can really help make your game time more efficient and more organized, while also allowing you to learn and experience as much as you can. If you're new to tabletop role-playing games, please leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. And if you're an experienced TTRPG player, leave a comment letting me know what you recommend all your new players bring to your table, aside from a sunny disposition, of course. I'm Loyal Pythias, your Forever DM, and I'll see you guys next time.